The sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer podcast. I'm Matt Martelli. This is the Off-Road Racer podcast, and I'm here with the mighty Dave Clark. What's going on, man?
All good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I don't normally do these kind of things.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, you're like one of those guys who is walking around behind the scenes, and I know who you are, but a lot of people don't know who you are, right? And what you're doing. They're like, who's this guy creeping around Tavo's truck, right? Let's go back to like the beginning. Like, how did you get involved with off-road racing?
Okay, when I was a teenager, I made the wonderful thing happen. I bought a blown-up Volkswagen for $400 and it needed to be rebuilt. So now I'm working on the motor, and of course I buy the Idiot's Guide to Volkswagens, and I buy the How to Hot Rod Your Volkswagen. So I start working on it, and a friend of mine's uncle was with off-road people, which I didn't even know what that was. But he had an uncle that worked on Alamo Street in Riverside. Well, back then there was like a bunch of people. There was Lee Layton, there was a McDonald's, like Kabbalah Duster crew. Henry Harris driving the yellow Bronco thing, his uncle Plax. A bunch of off-road people. It was a little hub.
Right.
Well, I went there and I met a Japanese cylinder head porter, Fumio Fukaya, and he did all the cylinder heads for like Impy and the drag races back then for Volkswagens. And I ended up helping out at his shop. I'd go there, sweep, clean, do anything. I did that on my own time. I begged to get in there to sweep the floor, and he said, okay. And then pretty soon he has me taking motors apart. And I think I did that nine months. So I'd go to, school in the morning, in the afternoon, go to his place, and evening go work, at a grocery store.
Right.
And then one day he said, hey, I want you to work here full time. So I was going to a local city college in the morning, and then I'd go there in the afternoon and work, and I learned welding and machining and all that. And then I took some classes at RCC, machine shop classes. And anyway, that opened the door to off-road racing, and that's how I met. One day, a guy came in. It was Danny Thompson, Mickey Thompson's son, and he was running a Class 1 buggy, and he got a motor sponsorship from Truhoff. There was a guy named Alan Truhoff back in the Impy days. You had Impy parts, Joe Vitone, and then you had Truhoff parts. It was Alan. So he was going to sponsor Danny, but he wanted Fumio to do the motor. So anyway, I meet Danny, and so we're going to do that. And then pretty soon, Danny's mechanic comes in bringing the motor. And it was this tall guy smoking a cigar, like lifts the motor out and goes, and it's Nye Frank. And it was like, it was a pretty impressive person when you first see him. You're a kid, and I'm looking at big cigar. That was back when people smoked. Anyway, it was Nye Frank, and I ended up chatting with him for months. And then one day he goes, Dave, you want to go to a race? And I'm like, what's that? A race? I can go. My eyes get this big. And he goes, yeah, just this weekend we're doing something. Why don't you come over and we'll just go over it, do it. Anyway, it was a short course race at Phoenix. It was Danny Thompson, like in a one car. And so we went, and that was it. I chatted with Nye one-on-one there. We did the race, came back, and Nye kept calling. And so weekends I would go to the races, and just back then you got to meet everybody. I remember Rick Mears and Roger Mears when they were in buggies, and got to see all kinds of stuff.
That must have been a pretty magical time, because you had that, kind of cross section of hot rod culture, and then it wasn't the beginning of off-road, but it was like the heyday.
Yeah. It was different. There were old timers back then also because they were the Jeep people after the World War II and all the surplus things hit the market, which that's the surplus drove everything. The drag race guys were buying their fittings from all surplus stuff that after the war and the Korean War it just hit. Okay, dispose inventory, surplus, sell it by the pound. Well, they're buying up all those fittings, and Earl's Plumbing bought that stuff, and that's how they started first selling it. So you get a lot of good stuff at the surplus market. And that's when, in that time period when Nye was doing his drag racing, that was people, he was in high school with a drag car, and he ended up setting records and, like the first to break 150 or 160. It was that time period.
Right.
And then he had a 2-engine car called the Freight Train. And he was really popular, did all kinds of things. But he was successful, going back to Nye, he was successful, but he liked off-road because it was more open to innovation.
Yeah, it's more open to innovation, but it was also, I think, with suspension, right? It's a bigger challenge, right? Because it's not just going fast in a straight line, right?
It's an incredible challenge, really. Is the suspension is everything. Also, like you said, tune your motor, gain 10 horsepower. Tune your chassis, gain 100. So the performance is in the suspension.
Yeah, but I mean, so then you meet Nye and start working with him. I mean, what was that like? I mean, was that like kind of mind blowing?
Yeah, but looking back on it, I was so fresh and new. It's hard to. I had to take it in and learn how to organize it because back then it's just you're doing the work. It's really I specifically remember going to like watching the race, like my first race. It was hard to tell who's leading once they're lapping, and it's like, where's the leader? Well, now I could go to any race and I can spot the leader, and oh, there's that. This is where everyone's at. Oh, that guy's turning better. This guy's blowing the turn, having
Right.
But in the beginning, it had to take all that in, so it took a little bit to absorb it all and organize it. But working with Nye was incredible because he was like a scientist. It was very methodical, and we machined everything. We made everything. He made his own shocks. He used Fox shocks originally with air shocks. We did everything with air shocks. But pretty soon we're making larger diameter, bigger shafts so we can like lower the air pressures, helps the seals, and we're making everything. So we make the shocks, so build the car, make the shocks, put it together, and then diagnose it and run it. But Nye was phenomenal. Excellent fabricator, excellent thinker, very and wanted to win.
He also struck me as somebody who's like just endlessly curious about everything.
Yeah, but interesting in everything. From when he goes out to like trim his trees, he's looking at the bugs and picking up a rock, and he got me into fossil hunting when we would go to off-road races. I ended up learning on the right dirt to spot where to go look for the right things.
Yeah.
Just so I learned that from him. Just we were testing, doing checkout runs in Placer City just Monday, and that's an ancient fossil bed. So I'm still amazed that you'll trip over a piece of petrified wood, and it's right there at Placer City, right where we test.
Yeah, it's cool. It's part of it, I think, though, too, is like reading terrain, becomes part of like how you look at everything from the off-road perspective.
Yeah.
No, one of the stories that I remember understanding how important I was to off-road racing culture was the famous, I think it was a Pro 2 or Pro 4 that got outlawed because of the air suspension.
Yeah.
That was built for Rob Mack, and he just went out and massacred everybody and explain that truck, because that still to this day, I mean, it's still there in Rob's shop, but it's illegal because of how well it performed.
They rewrote the rules around it. So, once it got dialed and a few issues got solved, it was pretty dialed. We made air shocks, and then we ended up having to, we water cool the air shocks. So we would use a water temp to keep them. It heats them up when they're cold, and then cools them down when they're hot. So it keeps the ride height kind of steady. And then once you have air shocks, you can do things. You can like connect the reservoirs together, and so that it becomes almost like a not an anti-roll bar, a roll. It helps you roll. You can change the behavior of the car by connecting the pieces. And so we had that kind of stuff we were doing. Well, they ended up taking away air shocks, and then there was a ride height rule, and we were able to run really low. So then they kind of distorted the way the rules were written and turned it into a ride height rule. So we struggled through one race because we were way too high now because it was a ridiculous thing. So we went back and we ended up we chopped the front off, we repositioned a little bit, and then Nye and I talked about it. I got under the car and we cut the bottom 2 inches of the car off, moved it up 2 inches, and just had a sheet metal right under the motor. Well, when we did that, it became dialed because really the motor was almost only raised a little bit, but we got like 5 more inches of ground clearance and we were able to run past their ride height thing without hardly anything. And now it dialed. And that set the car apart. When we made that change, the car became really good. And then Rob just ended up stomping, really. I think for 2 years, he was over 2 years, 2.5 years, he was the only winner at Crandon. He won the cup, won the governors, won the races, for 2.5 years until we got thrown out.
That's rad. It's just a rad thing about the innovation of like, okay, cool. Like you guys figured something out that was way better. And then, because everybody else couldn't, come up with it, then they're like, well, we're going to outlaw this. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
And, so then fast forward a little bit, you start working with Nye, and that's really during the Mickey Thompson era. And so, that led to you working with the Nissan team and, all of that. Talk about that era a little bit and working with Glenn Harris.
Yeah, that was the Mazda team. Glenn got it in the early 80s, maybe 84. He started talking to Mazda.
Yeah.
And we got factory sponsorship. I went to work I was helping him, but I was still working at Food Mills porting cylinder heads. But finally in 85, I left and I went to work with Nye full time. And the Mazda was an interesting project because they were rotaries. They're really small engines. They're spinning fast, but they're small engines. And then, so Nye built the cars. And when he designed suspension, he starts with certain characteristics that he wanted. And one, basically, the easiest one is roll center. Like when the forces act on the weight of the car, it does something. Well, it'll do it through like a point where it's happening. Well, if that point is like moving around in relationship to the center of gravity of the car, your characteristics change. As the car rolls, it might become harder to roll or easier. But the thing is it's changing. And that's an extra thing that the driver needs to learn. So by kind of maintaining the position of that single thing, you kind of help the predictability of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he was all about that in the beginning. When he first started designing, and he did the string computer thing, like in Carroll Smith's Tune to Win book. You build a scale model of the suspension, and you're looking at it in the third view, and you're using clecos to hold the arms and all that kind of stuff.
You.
If I turn that off,
no worries.
Anyway, you're using string to find the intersecting points and all that, and then you're doing all the geometry with the string computer.
Right,
and that's how we built everything. So now I use like a program and to do all that, but the string computer matches the computer program matches the string computer.
Right.
And that's how we did all that back then.
Yeah, I remember seeing, builders in that era and walking into their shop as a kid, and they would build suspension models out of cardboard, right? And look at how it moved and measure it, because that was pre-CAD, right? So they
Yes.
had to do it that way.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy to think about, again, like, these concepts coming from your mind and then being worked out in the physical real world, and then going to the track, improving them and going, okay, we got to change this. And why isn't this working? It's like, it's a puzzle, right? It's this constant troubleshooting. Do you think that that's something that drives you, is that problem solving?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the goal is to win, and to win, you have to like get there. So reliability is very important, the most important, but also the design is the little tweaks to the suspension. If you can, make, like I talked about roll center, we did a one where we had the roll center intentionally rise as it leaned because we thought that was going to be good. It wasn't, because it crept up on the driver too fast. It was again another thing to learn. Don't do that again. It's better not to do that.
Right.
So everything we do is like that. If something breaks, we need to figure it out, which we can talk about that more later. But the design is really fun.
Yeah.
That's all of it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So then, you start doing work with Glenn Harris, and this is the heyday of Mickey Thompson. Stadiums full of screaming fans, right? And then, desert racing on top of that. Like, it's funny because, like, I'm friends with Glenn, and he does this thing now where he'll pull out a photo and be like, "Hey, look at this," and then he'll tell me the backstory. And one of my favorite ones he showed me is the racing downtown Tokyo. Right? Were you around for that one?
No, I didn't go to that one.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. They did it long before Formula One did, right? And it's just such an iconic photo of him in his truck jumping, and it's clearly in Japan, right? So, no, it's pretty cool. But what was it like for you? I mean, because you were in your early 20s at that point?
Yeah, mid-20s.
Yeah, I mean, it was like being on on tour with rock bands, is what Rob Mack used to describe it as.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting because we're kids, we're going into new towns, staying in nice hotels, jumps. We did go to some Japan. I went to the factory a couple times and got to see all those kind of things. But here in Mickey Thompson, going to the different cities, nice hotels, the whole thing, and then the race, it was different. It was like rock star life, really.
But what was that like for you, as a young man, as a kid growing up, and, being a part of that, learning from all these guys that were, kind of the OG minds of off-road racing culture?
Well, it was kind of like it was business. I mean, we had fun, but it was all business because you couldn't like party and not work. You had to like make everything. We were always working, so we worked a lot. But again, Mickey Thompson days, you had Roger Mears over there. You had the Toyota people. Walker came in a little bit later. Yeah, it was really good. It was really the who's who in sports back. These were the people in their heyday behind cars and battling it out, and it was a contact sport. So
yeah, there was definitely touching.
Yeah. The rules evolved a bit for rough driving and all that, but it was definitely a leaning on and intimidation and performance help. If you were fast and can turn, then you had kind of an upper hand.
Yeah.
Attention Off-Road Nation, the Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship comes roaring through Parker, Vegas, and Barstow in 2024. It's three of the most prestigious and competitive off-road races in the sport. It all starts with the return of the Parker 400 in beautiful Arizona, January 10th through the 14th. Then it's the biggest, baddest, most grueling off-road race on the planet. The BF Goodrich Tires Mint 400 comes roaring back into Sin City, Las Vegas, March 6th through the 10th. And finally, the climactic conclusion of the Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship, the California 300, returns to Barstow, October 2nd through the 6th. Visit unlimitedoffroadracing.com for complete details. The 2024 Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship is here.
Do you have like a memory from that era that you like, oh yeah, there's this, you were telling me the story of, the water barriers. Like a lot of people don't know that Mickey Thompson invented the water barrier because they needed to move those barriers around quickly, and doing it with concrete wasn't easy. And if you hit a concrete barrier, it was going to destroy the vehicle.
Yeah. Mickey made the water barriers, and that's what he was always trying to make a business venture. He was trying to sell it to the Department of Transportation. At one of the Mickey Thompson races, they had like a little figure 8 course set up with the water barriers, and they were given rides. They had the highway patrol there and the sheriff, and they were given reporter rides. And Danny Thompson, his son, was the driver. And so he's taking like this rental car practically, giving a reporter a ride, and he would like brush up against it and to like go around the curve up against the water barrier. Okay, it's all fine. And he's doing it like 20, 25 miles an hour. this one female reporter gets in. He's giving her a ride. Well, something happened. He got up against it, and one pushed out. He ended up climbing up it and like jumping off the thing. He's probably 4 feet in the air. And I thought he was going to go over, but he didn't. He landed, and the car crinkled a little bit. But he gets out and sells it really good. See, we didn't crash. And the lady's going, wow, we're still alive. But I'm sore. And it's like, we're all like fighting our teeth. Like that almost went over. But anyway, that was a water barrier demonstration for like the law enforcement.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, now looking back, I mean, it's a pretty exciting era to be a part of because of how much of an evolution was made during that era, wouldn't you say?
It was a big evolution. And it used to be like all the performance was in the engine. So you were always trying to, which granted, you do need a motor. But for what Mickey Thompson races were different because they were built in the footprint of a baseball stadium or a football stadium. The Coliseum was Mickey's first venture in there, which I missed the first Coliseum, but I did go to the second one where they ran at night, had class 5 cars and buggies. But anyway, it had to fit in the footprint of a baseball field, football field. So when you did a turn, it was a true 180. There was a water barriers. You would drive around and do a true 180 against there. It was a tight radius turning. Cornering was everything. And then that's where all the people that did that kind of racing learned to make their cars turn. Even the short course racing they have back at Crandon, the tightest turn is like bigger than any sweeper we ever had in a football field footprint.
Yeah.
And so very different. So turning was everything.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone learned.
Absolutely. And then, so Glenn's a unique guy. Like, what was it like working with Glenn?
Yeah, Glenn was he's a businessman, and he was the driver. And when I first met him, he was doing a 10 car in Mickey Thompson, and he was really good, and he was winning all the time, doing really good. We were working on it all the time, CVs all the time. When he got the truck deal, Glenn comes across as mild-mannered and soft-spoken, but he has a talent, and his talent is he'll win. So he might not qualify the fastest, and during the race, you might think, except he'll win the race. I think he still has the all-time leading. I think he won 5 in a row back in the day, and I don't think that was broken in his vehicle. He won 5 in a row, so I think that's really good. He really is soft-spoken, but make no mistake, he's a driver.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Here, you want to turn off your ringer?
I thought I did.
No worries.
Anyway, what's any other?
Oh yeah, I got a lot more. How did this is a funny story, inside story, right? How did Rob Mack get his number?
21?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure on that one.
He said something about it being the same date as your marriage.
Oh, yeah. Well, 421. See, when in Pro 4, he was 421. But see, it's funny that's how we remember my anniversary with my wife. Because back there, we were 421 was our truck number. And when I got married, it was April 21st. And it was like, that was wild that it was the same number. And that's how we both remember my anniversary.
That's funny.
Anyway, so he kept 21.
Yeah, that's funny. Rob was telling me too, like, that spending time with you, that you, like Nye, were this kind of endlessly curious person. Like, you would do things like, like hunt for fossils, but he told me the story about you guys were driving across the country and you made him stop at the Mississippi River so you could stop and put your hand in the river. What is that? Why do you think you're that curious about things?
Well, it's a Mississippi, and people used to take months to cross, in the wagon, and here we just drive over and go down and see it. So I always like doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When we were at the La Paz one year at the finish line, the Mazda people were there, and I got them all. We all went down and peed in the ocean, the Sea of Cortez. So you had all the businessmen that they never would do that. And we walked out there and went and touched the water, and here you are.
Stop and smell the roses.
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's rad. Yeah, it's interesting. What do because you had the experience of working in Mickey Thompson, and then our evolution of outdoor short course that we have now. I mean, what was that transition like? Because for people who don't understand, the Mickey Thompson cars were specifically built for those, like you said, those kind of tighter courses, and it was a specific vehicle. And then that got evolved to what we have now as short course vehicles, which were bigger, longer outdoor tracks.
Well, it was completely different. The Mickey Thompson days, like you said, that was very intense racing. A lot of it would happen all in one day. Would practice, qualify, and race, and later 2 heats and a main all on Saturday. So it was pretty intense. Once it opened up a little bit in the Midwest, the Crandon tracks and all that, that changed a lot because you had more mom and pop. You still had the Jeeps, and you had the different technology, more simpler vehicles.
Yeah.
And in that time period, then you had a few of the West Coast, Kurt LeDuc, and, eventually everyone else made their cars, went out there and competed. So the tracks, were more opened up, higher speed. And so the cars had to be better because now Mickey Thompson, we're hitting 45 or 50.
Right.
But, Crandon, you're going over 100. And so all of a sudden, a lot more can happen at those speeds.
What, out of all the vehicles that you built, was there one that was like your favorite build?
Well, I've liked them all over the years. The Rob's Air car, that was fun. That was a good build, and it was good to maintain it. I liked working with Nye. That was a car that we designed, built, made everything for it. Like I said, we made the shocks, made it, made the steering system, and made the ram for the steering and everything. And I enjoy all the projects I work on, but that was probably one of because it ended up being really fun. And also Nye and I did a single seat car for Rob, a trophy truck, and we only ran that 1 year, but that was also a fun build, and we ran it for 1 year and then it went away. But the Air car is probably one of my favorites.
Does that truck have a name?
Actually, it does. If this comes back, it's called Murray, and that was it. We made. I think Rob's wife told me the story that Rob one time said he liked the name Murray. They were talking about something, and she said, "Oh," and Rob said, "Oh, Murray, that's an interesting name." So I made a sticker and put it on his visor, and so I guess it's Murray. That's what I think it was called.
Yeah, it's one thing to really point out so people understand, like, in that era, you didn't go to a Mackenzie's and pick up parts, right? You had to make everything, the hubs, all the tie rods, like literally everything had to be made in your shop, or you had to go get somebody to make it for you.
No, we made it. I mean, there's like 87 misalignment spacers, between the steering, tie rods, and links. We made all that. There was you didn't call somebody. And we never had access to screw machines or CNCs.
So do you think that gives you, a better knowledge base to apply now? Because you've literally, like, you were talking about the fact that, like, you started working on engines, and and now fast forward to working with the Vildosola team, and kind of being oversight with everything going on there. You literally understand the vehicle from tip to tail.
Yeah, well, we try to. I mean, I try and keep anything that breaks, we go. And I don't oversight. Javi oversight. I assist.
Right.
So I don't have that headache part. Yeah, no, it's interesting because we have to, if something does fail, we try to diagnose it, figure it out, get with the manufacturer if we can, or make it yourself or something.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because again, it's like now you have specialists, right? You have guys who are just suspension guys, guys who are just like gearing guys who are just, engine guys, and you really know everything. And one of the interesting things I remember, and we were back at Cran, and you were showing me your spring calculator, and of course I was way over my head, but you're like, yeah, this is simple. These are the inputs, and here's how you calculate everything and figure out what your spring rate is. And I'm like, okay, like you just took something that's very complex, put it into this, you had an app that you had at the time, and there's the answer.
Yeah, that is more of a hobby. There's a certain calculations you need to do all the time, gearing, springing, and also somebody would ask a question. They go, well, I have a Ranger and I want to take two leaf springs off the rear. What does that do? Well, that got me thinking that I would do like a general spring program that does, torsion bars, leaf springs, coil springs, and I also have air shocks in there. Well, that was a way of occupying the evening, because in the old days when you're kids, you go out party all the time when you're done working. Well, that gets old eventually, or it should. And then, so in the evening, I would pick different projects. So that's when I would, play with programming and then automate some of the calculations you're kind of doing. The short course racing, you're doing gearing all the time, and you have underdrives. So I would have all my stuff, on my phone, and as I'm walking back, I already know what gears I'm going to put in or how many RPM it's going to change. So I just say, oh, put that gear in, and then just continue on. But that was all for fun and to keep learning.
Well, you were showing me earlier, you built one that's specific for all the all-wheel drive vehicles because of all the variables. Walk me through that again.
Well, these Masons, they have a front gear, they have a rear gear. Well, and then they have a 6-speed transmission. The transmission also has like a underdrive built in it, a drop gear. So the drive shaft coming out of the engine's not even engine speed. It's already been changed, and it's in a different gear. It goes to the front transfer case, which is also, it's the front gear. And then the portals in the front have their own gear ratio in them. And then that transfer case has gears coming around.
No worries.
I don't know. Can you put it outside?
Yeah, there you go.
It has gears going to the rear, and then the rear has, anyway, so I think there's like 16 variables.
Yeah.
And so then I just automated that. Not that we play with them so much, but it was fun to do. So I automated it, so I just enter all the inputs, hit click, and then it just tells me what the gear ratios are, front and rear, because you can have one faster or slower than the other.
Sure.
And then you can also move individual gears around to get your drop splits in between gear shifts, what you want.
And what does that do to the performance of the vehicle?
Well, you're trying to stay in the performance envelope of the engine. Think about the engine's going to make its best torque in a certain range. Well, what you want to do is when you shift gears, like you say you bring it close to the upper limit, maybe not the rev limit, but the upper torque limit, when you shift, you want that RPM drop to be in the best spot, that you're still in torque of the motor. And so by playing with all that and seeing a number, you can decide to move gears around to make the most horsepower, that you still have the most horsepower after the gear shift driving the tires. So that's all it is. And it was fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's rad.
Off-road race fans, the third annual California 300 off-road race comes blasting back into Barstow this fall, Thursday, October 3rd through Sunday, October 6th. Don't miss your chance to see hundreds of the country's elite desert off-road racers go door to door on a brutal 300-mile desert race course and witness the exciting conclusion of the unlimited off-road racing championship season. Visit thecalifornia300.com for more information and to purchase spectating, camping, parking, and VIP tickets. The California 300 returns!
Do you keep count of how many vehicles you've built over the years?
No, not really. I'd have to think of, and a lot of them I worked on other vehicles.
Sure.
Actual building, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sure it's over 20 or something or whatever.
Yeah.
But then I've also worked on a lot of existing things. Tune on them, try and make them better.
What besides the Rob Mack truck, I know you've built vehicles for Vildosola as well. Like, was there one of the last era? Like, I remember, I think it was a pre-runner was the last one you built for them.
Yeah. Gus's pre-runner
Yeah.
was fun. It was a dive front. That's right. With Nye, he really liked dive front ends where the wheel goes back. The wheelbase changes, so it's really a pro dive. And Gus's pre-runner is built that way. Yeah, the two-wheel drive for Vildosola, that was a great project. Built at my house, and then they finished it, at the shop. But it's a pro dive front suspension,
Yeah.
like Nye's kind, and that's how Gus's pre-runner is.
Nice. Nice. That was a really, really nice pre-runner, Um, you know, now you obviously you're working on a Mason truck, but is there a vehicle, like if there's no budget, right? No budget, no time limit, was there a vehicle that you'd want to build?
Well, yeah, I would. I'm waiting for the day when everybody builds their own stuff again, and then goes competing. But yeah, I definitely want to build. Change it up a little bit. They've built Masons have built a great platform. Everyone's buying them, and they're fairly reliable, and they're competing against each other. But I would definitely like to take the parts and maybe change it up a little bit.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely. Um, you know, this is kind of back to the question of of this endless curiosity. A lot of people think that you know that knowledge is a like a fixed destination, like, oh, that dude's knowledgeable. But do you believe that, or do you believe that it's a journey?
Oh no, it's a journey. Anybody, the it's just the bummer part is the more you learn, the less you know, because you actually have more questions, and so really, no, it's a journey because everything's so complex that all you can do is try to get a grasp enough to like move on to the next wall, and then get a concept of that wall, and then move on to the next one. Oh no, there's value always learning. So get so much from a book. Everything we do is all about physics and everything. So no, you always have to learn.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about making sure that people understand the science of what's going on with the vehicles, and for off-road vehicles, they're very unique in that suspension is what is probably the most important thing. Explain that the concepts of what's going on, because there's a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot. These vehicles, they weigh close to 7,000 pounds. When you hit that big 3-foot whoop, that energy didn't just disappear, and the shocks didn't just absorb it. It got changed, and basically the energy got changed into heat. So a lot's going on. The spring is just holding. If say you weigh 5,000 pounds and you hit something at 3 Gs, all of a sudden there's 15,000 pounds that you're hitting. Well, we see those numbers all the time. Well, the spring needs to be able to hold that amount of force, and then the spring gives it back virtually unchanged. The shock needs to take that energy and change it into heat. Those are all the things that's going on, that's actually happening. So the bump didn't just disappear, it got changed into heat. Now the question is, will it overheat, or will there be a problem? Also, there's loads on all the pivots, and there's friction involved, but basically that's what's happening. It's all physics.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and like when you start understanding that, and then the terrain variables that we go through, right, radically different, right? So the truck has to perform in really big rough stuff, square edges, flat stuff, sand, rock, climbing up hills, altitude. We're doing, I think the highest point we race on in Mexico is probably 4,000 or 5,000 feet. So pretty radical changes that this vehicle has to work through, without fail.
Yes. That's why you'll right now, until we have like fully adjustable digital shocks that will adjust real time. Right now, you kind of take your best compromise for the terrain. So like, for instance, like a San Felipe setup will be completely different than your Mint. Over there will be way different. You take your San Felipe, the shock speeds are fast enough that you could be soft and loose and all that. And it goes fast enough that everything works. But you take that and go to the Mint where you're G-loading in between, driving up faces of ramps, G-loaded, it won't be enough. You'll have to change your suspension.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I always hear the Formula One guys talk about like, oh, the track changes, right? And I'm like, well, ours are a bit different. They're radically different, right? But yeah, there's a different setup for San Felipe. There's a different setup for the Mint, different setup for Parker, different setup for the 500, et cetera. What for you, like, in your career and everything that you've done, what do you think keeps driving you? What do you think keeps, making you want to show up to work every day and do more?
Well, the technology is everything. It's the building the stuff, machining, going for performance. It's all, I work in a candy shop. That's what it is. It's really fun. I enjoy it. Obviously enjoy winning, but I also enjoy, if something does break, I enjoy, trying to figure out why, try to do something about it. Those kind of things. So I work in a candy shop and I know that.
Yeah. I mean, the Vildosolas are pretty amazing people. And like that program, I mean, obviously between you and Javi and the entire team down there, it's a special program.
Yeah, we have a good thing going, and Gustavo and Tavo, they're both, they want it, they love what they do, they're race car drivers, and also they provide the facilities and everything that we need to do it. So we get to, mag machine parts, look for cracks. We need to analyze stuff. Sometimes if something breaks, we send it to an outside facility where they'll do a metallurgical analysis, and we'll get a sheet that says what it's made of. And then, then you can look in the book and see, well, is there something better for this? So, all that kind of stuff. So we really get to use everything at our disposal. And I think it's fun. It's just so fun. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. What, it's interesting. Like, you're, again, a unique person that you've seen this whole history of, off-road vehicle evolution. What do you think is next?
Well, obviously, it's going to be the electronics, because when processing speeds keeps getting faster, storage is getting cheaper, and then it's going to be a new era, because now we'll have more involvement in computers, and really with machine learning and pattern recognition. Who's to say how much involvement a camera could help adjust the shocks, AI, all those kind of things. That's clearly, and when they actually do a shock that is more adjustable, whatever technology, whether it's better bypass tubes or the metallic fluid, whatever, but if it can be done real time and something quick thinking like a human, actually adjust it. Because right now, if you do something manually, we're not fast enough right now to go between, like I said, in between two bumps, driving up the face of something into whoops. That all happens in milliseconds. But no, that's clearly going to be the electronics.
It's interesting too now with having Starlinks on the vehicles. Like people are looking at that and going, oh yeah, video applications so that we can, use it for live streams. But what a lot of people don't understand is the data acquisition. Like now with all the sensors and you guys were one of the first guys, not the first guys, but you were one of the groups that was starting to put sensors everywhere on the truck. Was that you driving that, or was that Javi, or both of you?
No, in the beginning, being in short course racing, I had access to some Ford equipment. And so they had a system that I was able to put on the truck and do the shock potentiometers. And you'd have some speeds and pressures and stuff, but the shock data. So when I first went to Vildósolas, I still had access to that system. And so we put it on just to get some data. In fact, there was a time when I wanted to know a specific place to put a tube. This is when I worked for Kyle Taylor in Hemet. We built a trophy truck, a trip truck or whatever. Anyway, I kept a position on the body open, and I was going to put the final tube only in a certain range. So we built the shocks, had King built the shocks. They did everything I wanted, but we left one area open. We kind of dialed the truck in. We were happy with it. And then with the suspension things, we ran over a certain kind of terrain that you see in Nevada mostly. And then I took that data and I said, okay, we see that most of the time. So I want to make a change only in that area. So with that data, I was able to bring that down to where the shock piston is on that terrain for the best in desert races. And so we went to Lance and said, hey, we want a tube just here. And Lance was really good to talk. So we went back, chatted with him a while. I gave him some data, some sheets, and he's looking at it and goes, man, I've never gotten this kind of information. And with Lance, it was carte blanche. He goes, what do you want? And so I think we just put a little tube right there, and it ended up really being good. And that was data driven. So that was really, really good to be involved. Since I was a kid, I was like a programmer. When the computers first came out, I was the first one that had a VIC-20 out of all my friends. And then I learned BASIC. And then I was the first one to spend $600 for a 5 1/4 floppy because it had a tape drive. So I saved up money. I bought one of the floppy things people don't even know what they are now.
Yeah.
And it was like a lot, but I had that. And
Yeah. I remember having to learn code as a kid to get computers to do things, and especially in graphic design, like typesetters, right? The Linotronic typesetters. So in order to get a line of text, you had to type in like 4 or 5 lines of code, right? Now, now with Macs, it's like you just type what you want and there it is, right? But it was definitely interesting. So then, after that, like, we start getting computers and trucks that can acquire data, and you guys started putting more sensors throughout the truck, right?
Yes. It seems like when you build a truck, you've changed things around. You did something with the cooler. You're trying to make it light. So it's better, we believed right initially, that it's better to put 2 temp sensors. What's coming out of the motor, for instance, the water temp out, water temp back in. How good is our system doing? All of that's diagnosis. And, right now, like we have all the teams have like 1,000 channels. They're seeing how many amps each radiator fan is drawing and what RPMs and pressures and speeds and temperatures. And that's all diagnostic, and also trying to anticipate a failure. So, if you have 3 radiator fans, normally if one starts to go, amp draw will go up. Well, you can see that. You can't just put new every time. Then it'd be $1 million truck every race. You can't do that. You have to have some kind of a prep schedule on something that you can anticipate, and certainly anticipate failures if you can. And that's all data driven.
Is there something that you guys learned through that data that surprised you?
Well, yeah, there's always things about, I didn't realize the forces are that much, or I didn't realize the speeds that much, or pressure spikes. You're always surprised. Once you start logging stuff, you might have an inkling of what might be going on, but when you start seeing the range of numbers, then you're impressed. Going back to one of the Crandon days on Rob's air truck on that Ford system, they had some accelerometers. And I remember I bought something out of a Granger catalog to put on the car. Or going back to, they had provided me an accelerometer. Right. It was off of IndyCar. And they said, oh, this will be good enough for you because the IndyCar is running. Okay, we put it on. And they're looking at the data of like going across the high speed in a turn 1. And then there was some whoops back then. And they're looking at the data coming from the accelerometer going through the whoops when we're going like 105. And they're going, wow, we didn't think that you guys would see that at all. It was just amazing, some of the forces.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, having a conversation with Javi, and he was explaining, some of the feedback that you guys were getting from the suspension, and from data acquisition, and how it changed the setup of the vehicle.
Yeah, there'll be some times where you're not sure if, for instance, if the driver induced something or did something happen and the driver's correcting it. So we've found that before, where well, like for instance, we'll find out that the back stepped out and the driver corrected it. That's different than the driver causing it. And that leads you in a different direction.
Sure.
So that's all really good for that. Now it gets heavy at times because there's so much data, then you need to like put it together and use math channels to present the areas that you're looking for, specific things that you're looking for. Because the data doesn't reach out and hold your hand.
Right.
You definitely have to ponder it for a bit.
Yeah. But is there an area where like the data has really helped you advance, like in transmission or in, engine setup or suspension?
Yeah, data really helps in reliability. That's beyond a doubt. Is it too hot? Are you cooling it enough? After that, it'll be speeds. Are you speeding something up too much and it's wearing out and we need to slow it down? And then going to shock sensors, it is true that knowing the overall max shock speeds that you're seeing, if at different races, you'll see San Felipe will be higher shaft speeds than somewhere else, and that helps drive your choices, gives you like proof for the choice you're making going into something.
Yeah, it's interesting because now we're being faced with a new challenge, which is cool. You're getting data, and how are you interpreting that data during a race? Right. And like for Javi sitting in the co-driver's seat, like what is he seeing and what is he doing and telling Tavo to do? Like even simple stuff like just, wheel sensors of like you're about to get a flat, right? They could see the pressure go down on a tire, and that gives you time to make a decision of where to pull over and change it, what's going to happen, or we're almost to a pit, we're going to ride it out, right? Whereas before it's like you don't know that tire's going until it's gone, and at that point it can be catastrophic, right? Like it could destroy a hub, it could destroy a drive shaft. Like there's all sorts of issues that it can cause.
Oh yeah. The tire pressure sensors are like probably during the race the most important, really. I mean, you see temperatures and pressures of the car itself, but the tires, I mean, they're the only thing hooking all of that mechanism to the ground. And yeah, that, like you said, and Javi's really good at that too, because he knows the programming side of it, and he's a mechanic and he's in it.
Yeah.
So he's able to deal with all of that more. So he's set up the screens, display the best information that he needs and that the co-driver would need. But yeah, the tire sensors definitely are gold.
Yeah, it's interesting because like now you don't want just a guy who can navigate good and is mechanically inclined. Now you need a really smart guy in your co-driver seat to, take in all the data that's happening and look at it and go, basically help you make decisions while the driver's doing all the driving work, right?
Yeah. There's a lot going on. It's complex. I mean, each keypad controls something, and they'll be, right down to you want traction control, what level, and those kind of things. So there is motor, do you want less horsepower for the motor? Click, and there's somebody has to be apt with technology enough to make the right choices.
Nice.
Definitely not make the wrong one.
Yeah, I'd be a terrible co-driver. Well, that was awesome. I really appreciate it, man. I look forward to doing it again. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right.